You know how some people say you can feel when something's wrong? Like a gut instinct? Yeah, well, Sarah and Daniel Parker had that feeling the day they hired Emily. It started as a normal Tuesday morning in their sleepy suburban neighborhood in Millfield, the kind of place where lawns are trimmed and neighbors still wave hello. Sarah was rushing out the door for her new job at the design firm downtown, while Daniel, already late for a meeting, was stuffing toast in his mouth and trying to soothe their 9-month-old daughter Lily. They needed help. Badly. So, like any desperate young couple juggling parenthood and careers, they turned to CareFinders, an upscale babysitting agency. Within an hour of submitting their request, they received a glowing recommendation for a sitter named Emily Rivers. 26, CPR certified, degree in early childhood education, perfect background check, 5-star reviews from previous families. Too good to be true? Well, yeah. Emily showed up that evening for the interview, and right off the bat she was lovely, sweet, soft-spoken, and with this calm aura about her that immediately made Lily stop crying, something even Sarah struggled with. She wore a pale blue cardigan, had freckles like she spent her summers reading under the sun, and eyes so blue they almost didn't look real. "You're like Mary Poppins," Daniel had joked. She just smiled. Only less musical. They laughed. They hired her. And just like that, Emily became a part of their lives. At first, everything was perfect. Lily adored her. Emily arrived early, stayed late, and never once looked at her phone. Sarah would come home to find the laundry folded, dishes done, even the baby monitor cleaned. Daniel was the first to say it. "I think she's a godsend." But then, little things started happening. Tiny, easily dismissible things. Like Sarah swore she left her wedding ring on the bathroom counter but found it on the kitchen windowsill. Daniel once came home and found Lily's room colder than the rest of the house, the window slightly ajar, when it had definitely been shut that morning. And then there were the toys. Lily had this old stuffed bear practically falling apart, but it was her favorite. One evening, Sarah found it buried at the bottom of the toy box, torn at the seams. Emily said Lily threw it. Daniel offered, shrugging. "Still," Sarah murmured. "She's only 9 months old. She can barely crawl." But they brushed it off. New parents working long hours, maybe they were just being paranoid. Then came the night of the camera. It was Sarah's idea. Not because she suspected anything, at least that's what she told herself, but because, hey, it's what parents did these days. For peace of mind. So she ordered one of those tiny nanny cams disguised as a photo frame and placed it in the living room, where Emily and Lily spent most of their time. And for 2 days nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Until Sarah got curious. She poured herself a glass of wine late Friday night, opened her laptop and pulled up the footage. At first it was just Emily singing nursery rhymes, feeding Lily, dancing around with her. Normal stuff. Sweet even. Then at 2:47 p.m. on Thursday's footage, Emily stopped singing. She put Lily in her playpen and walked straight up to the camera. Not like she noticed it, no, she looked directly into the lens as if she knew it was there all along. And she smiled. Not the warm, friendly smile they knew. This one was slow, cold, like a smirk. Then just as calmly she whispered something. No sound, it was a silent feed, but Sarah could clearly read the words. "Is this what you wanted to see, Sarah?" The glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. The next day, Daniel watched the footage and tried to play it off. She probably talks to herself. Or maybe she saw a reflection. "Don't overthink it." She said my name. She could have heard us mention it, maybe the baby monitor picked it up. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling. That night she didn't sleep. She installed 3 more cameras, in the hallway, the nursery, and outside the house. Just to be sure. What they found next shook them both. Sunday evening. Sarah and Daniel had gone out for a short dinner date while Emily stayed with Lily. They came home around 9, everything peaceful, lights dimmed, Lily fast asleep. Emily was in the kitchen washing bottles. "Everything okay?" Sarah asked. Emily turned and smiled. "Perfect." The next morning, Daniel checked the footage. And there it was. 8:15 p.m. Emily was sitting on the couch, cradling Lily. Then she stood up and walked to the nursery. But she didn't come back for nearly an hour. The footage from the nursery camera showed her standing beside the crib. Just standing. For almost 45 minutes. She didn't move. Didn't speak. Just stared down at Lily, completely still like a statue. Then she reached into her cardigan pocket, pulled out a small black notebook and started writing in it. She flipped a page. Then another. Then another. All blank. Until she stopped, looked directly into the camera again and mouthed the same phrase. "Is this what you wanted to see?" Daniel slammed the laptop shut. "We're firing her." But they didn't. Because before they could say anything, Emily quit. Monday morning, she called and calmly said she wouldn't be able to continue. Family emergency. No explanation. And she was gone. Sarah tried to call the agency, only to be met with confusion. "There's no Emily Rivers in our system," they said. "We've never had anyone by that name." Sarah froze. "But you sent her to us." "Ma'am, we didn't." "The number Emily used?" "Disconnected." "Her glowing reviews?" "Gone." No social media. No LinkedIn. No trace. It was like she never existed. But the camera said otherwise, and so did the journal. See, in her rush to leave, Emily left something behind. That small black notebook. It had been tucked behind Lily's crib, wedged between the bars. Sarah found it while changing the sheets. The pages? Still blank. Except the last one. Written in messy, slanted letters. "I remember you. Do you remember me?" They went to the police. Of course they did. But there was no crime to report. No theft, no abuse. Just eerie footage and a strange notebook. "Probably a disturbed individual," the officer said. "You're lucky nothing happened." But Sarah couldn't let it go. She spent hours Googling Emily Rivers. Nothing matched. Until she looked up one of the old addresses Emily had mentioned in her interview. A farmhouse in upstate New York. She found a news article from 1995. A fire. 3 dead. 1 survivor. Babysitter. The photo was grainy. The survivor, a teenage girl, was never named. But the face, the eyes, whoa, almost too blue to be real. And then Lily said it. 3 weeks after Emily disappeared. One morning, just after sunrise, Sarah walked into Lily's room to find her standing up in the crib, babbling happily. But one word stood out. Clear as day. Mimi. Sarah's heart stopped. That's what Emily used to call herself. Mimi, because Lily couldn't say Emily yet. "Mimi," Lily said again, pointing at the corner of the room. The empty corner. Daniel said it was just a coincidence. Babies repeat sounds. It didn't mean anything. But Sarah knew better. Because that night, when she checked the footage from Lily's room, the camera had glitched. Just for 5 seconds. But in those 5 seconds, a shadow flickered across the crib. The kind of shape that looked like a person. A woman. Wearing a pale blue cardigan. And smiling. Sarah couldn't stop watching the footage. She must have replayed those 5 seconds at least 30 times. Each time she hoped maybe she'd see something different, that the shadow was just a trick of the light or a glitch in the video feed. But it wasn't. The figure was there. Too distinct to ignore. Too real to dismiss. And though the image was blurry, the outline was unmistakable, shoulders hunched slightly, head tilted, a faint impression of hair falling to one side. And that smile. Sarah knew that smile. She'd seen it in her dreams, and now it had returned in static and pixels. Daniel tried to stay rational. That was his thing, always the level-headed one. He blamed it on stress, lack of sleep, and probably even the leftover wine from the night before. "It's a compression artifact," he insisted, waving at the laptop screen. "Wi-Fi lag messes up the feed all the time. You're seeing what you want to see." "Daniel," Sarah said, voice sharp, "I don't want to see Emily standing over our daughter's crib in the middle of the night. Don't be ridiculous." He didn't have a response to that. And when Lily started crying at 3:12 a.m. for the 3rd night in a row, always at 3:12 on the dot, Sarah got out of bed and sat by the crib until the sun came up. She didn't see anything that night. But that didn't mean nothing happened. A week passed. The house grew heavy with tension, as if the walls were listening. Daniel suggested taking a break. Maybe a weekend trip to clear their heads. "Somewhere far away," he said. "Let's just breathe for a while." But Sarah couldn't. She was convinced that something wasn't finished, that Emily hadn't left. Not really. Lily's behavior had changed. Subtle things. She'd stare off into the distance and smile, like someone was making faces at her from the shadows. Once, Sarah caught her reaching her tiny hand toward the baby monitor. "Mimi," she giggled. "Mimi." And then one night, something worse happened. Sarah heard 2 voices on the monitor. One was Lily's, soft, babbling, happy. The other wasn't. It was a whisper. So faint it was almost nothing, just a hush of breath. But it said something that made Sarah's skin crawl. Soon. She ripped the monitor from the wall and threw it in the trash the next morning. Daniel still tried to reason through it all. Maybe Emily planted some kind of speaker? Maybe she was trying to mess with us. Why? Sarah snapped. Why would she do that? Who is she? That question became Sarah's obsession. She revisited the article about the farmhouse fire. Dug deeper. Found a name buried in the archived police report. Margaret R. Ellis, 16. Babysitter. Sole survivor. Margaret. It didn't sound like Emily. Sarah couldn't let it go. She tracked down a phone number for the county's public records office and requested the case file. Most of it had been lost in a fire. How convenient, but there was one surviving document. A sketch. A police artist's rendering of Margaret Ellis from 1995. When Sarah opened the file, she froze. Because even in rough pencil lines and faint shading, she knew. It was her. It was Emily, but aged down. It didn't make sense. If the girl in the sketch was 16 in 1995, she'd be almost 45 now. Emily looked 26. At most. Unless... no. It was impossible. Wasn't it? 2 nights later, Sarah found Lily holding something in her crib. A photograph. Black and white. Burned around the edges. It wasn't theirs. They'd never seen it before. The photo showed 3 children sitting on the front porch of a farmhouse. The boy on the left looked about 10. The girl on the right wore pigtails and a gingham dress. And in the middle, slightly blurred, was the 3rd child. The face was hard to see. Almost faded. But the eyes? They were bright. Unnaturally bright. Whoa. Sarah flipped it over. Scrawled in pen were the words, "Remember what you promised, Mimi?" She nearly dropped it. "How did this get here?" she asked Daniel. But he didn't answer. He was staring at Lily's closet. Because the door was cracked open. And inside was the faintest scent of lavender. Emily's perfume. They moved into a hotel the next day. Sarah didn't care how it looked. She didn't care if people thought she was losing her mind. She knew something had followed them, or maybe something had stayed behind, embedded in the walls of their home. They took nothing with them. Not even Lily's favorite bear. Just their clothes, documents, and the baby. That night in the hotel, Sarah slept for the first time in days. Until 3:12 a.m. She jolted upright. The room was cold. Too cold. The baby monitor, the new one they'd picked up that afternoon, crackled with static. Then through the grainy noise came a voice. Not a whisper this time. A laugh. Soft. Musical. Familiar. And then, "You can't run from a promise, Sarah." The screen lit up, and for a split second Sarah saw her. Standing by the crib. Hand gently resting on the rail. Smiling. Then gone. The next morning, Sarah demanded answers. She drove to the last known address of the Ellis family, the ones who had perished in the farmhouse fire. It was a nursing home now. And inside, she found someone she didn't expect. Edith Ellis, the younger sister of Margaret. She had survived the fire too, but had been sent to live with relatives out of state. Her name hadn't come up in the original records. Edith was old now. Frail. But her mind was sharp. Sarah told her everything. The babysitter, the cameras, the whispers, the photo. Edith just nodded slowly. Then said, "So she found another child." Sarah blinked. "Who?" "My sister," Edith said. "Margaret. She was different. Even when we were kids. She never aged like the rest of us. She'd go missing for days, then show up with no explanation. And she loved children. Said they were the only ones who remembered." "Remembered what?" "The promises." Sarah's hands were shaking. "What do you mean?" Edith looked her dead in the eye. "She made a deal with something. A long time ago. To protect children, she said. But it wasn't protection. It was something else." Sarah's mouth went dry. "What did she do to them?" Edith closed her eyes. "She takes them. Leaves a part of herself in their minds. Waits until they remember her. Then, she returns." Sarah didn't wait for more. She rushed home, back to the house she swore she'd never return to. She had to end this. She searched every inch of Lily's room. Nothing. Until she opened the crawl space behind the nursery wall. Inside was a small wooden box. Dusty. And inside it? Photos. Dozens of them. Black and white. Faded. Children. All different. Different decades. Different houses. But one thing was the same in every photo. A woman standing just behind them. Sometimes blurry. Sometimes sharp. Always smiling. Always watching. And always with those eyes. Whoa. So blue they didn't look real. Sarah burned the box. Then she gathered everything. The notebook, the camera footage, the photo from the crib, and drove 2 hours to a small, secluded chapel that her grandmother had once told her about. They say it was built on hallowed ground, her grandmother used to whisper. No evil can cross its gates. It was barely more than a ruin now. But Sarah walked in and sat Lily down on the floor in the center. She waited. 3:12 a.m. The air changed. It grew still. Cold. Then, From the shadows near the altar came a voice. Sarah. She turned. Emily stepped forward. Or Margaret. Or whatever she really was. You broke your promise, the woman said gently. You remembered me, and you tried to forget again. Sarah stood between her and Lily. I never made a promise. But Emily just smiled that slow, crooked smile. Not in this life. She took another step forward. And the chapel groaned. The walls trembled. But then silence. Emily stopped. Her eyes flicked toward the altar, then back to Sarah. Her smile faded. You think this place will protect you? No, Sarah said. But it knows what you are. Emily's face darkened. You can't keep her forever, she whispered. They always come back to me. That's the deal. Then she stepped back. And vanished. The next morning, Sarah returned home. The house was empty. So, nothing moved. No shadows. No whispers. And Lily? She slept through the night. 3:12 a.m. came and went. And nothing happened. But 2 weeks later, as Sarah was folding laundry, she found a new photograph slipped under Lily's bedroom door. It was of Lily, taken from above, sleeping in her crib, and in the corner of the frame, just barely visible, was a hand, reaching down, with a note attached. You brought her into the world. I only reminded her where she came from. You'd think once you stare a nightmare in the face it'd back off, that it'd slink away into the shadows and leave you alone. But that's not what happened. Not for Sarah. Not after the photo. It had been 2 weeks since she returned from the chapel, since that eerie confrontation with the woman who called herself Emily, or Margaret, or whatever she truly was. For 2 weeks, everything had been quiet. No whispers. No laughter on the monitor. No shadows. But then came the photograph. It was laid neatly under Lily's door. As if it had been developed just hours before. It showed Lily sleeping peacefully in her crib, bathed in soft moonlight. But in the upper right corner, just barely visible half in frame, was a hand. Long fingers. And just beside it, a faint outline of a shadow leaning over the railing. Sarah knew that hand. She'd seen it reach for her daughter before, in her dreams, in the glitching cameras in the crawlspace behind the nursery. Attached to the photo was a note. No envelope. Just taped to the back. Scrawled in black ink. You brought her into the world. I only reminded her where she came from. Sarah read the sentence again and again, trying to make sense of it. What did it mean, where she came from? Daniel didn't want to hear it. I'm done, he said, rubbing his temples, voice low with exhaustion. We've burned things, we've left the house, you brought our baby to a ruined church in the middle of the night, and now we're back at square one. This has to stop. You saw the photo. And, he snapped. Maybe someone's stalking us. Maybe someone's messing with us for attention. But if we keep obsessing over her, we invite her back. Sarah stood silently. He didn't get it. He thought this was psychological. Paranormal maybe, but still a problem to be solved. A puzzle to crack. But Sarah was starting to understand something far more terrifying. This wasn't a haunting. This was a memory. A thread that had been pulled too far, and now it was unraveling. Not from the outside in, but from within. She began to write everything down. Every detail. Every strange occurrence. Every word that Emily had said. And that one phrase kept echoing. You brought her into the world. I only reminded her where she came from. Sarah started asking questions. To people she never thought she'd reach out to. She called her mother, something she hadn't done in months. Not because they weren't close, but because her mother always had a way of brushing off anything that didn't fit neatly into logic. But this time, her mom hesitated. When Sarah mentioned Emily, the shadow, the notes, her mother fell silent on the other end of the line. Then she said, Do you remember the day you were born, Sarah? Sarah blinked. What? I mean, the date. Of course I do. July 6th. No, her mother whispered. I mean the real day. Pause. Then her mother said something she had never said before. You were stillborn. Sarah's heart stopped. What? Just for a minute? Maybe less. You weren't breathing. They said you were gone. Your father? He screamed at the nurses. I just remember the silence. And then you gasped. Like something pulled you back. Sarah was frozen. And I never talked about it, her mother continued, because I didn't understand it. But after you came home, strange things started happening. You used to laugh in your sleep. We'd hear voices on the baby monitor. I thought it was just the house or my nerves. But now, silence again. And then, maybe something came back with you. That night, Sarah barely slept. She sat beside Lily's crib, holding the old bear that had been missing for days, the one she just found sitting upright in the middle of the living room. It hadn't been there earlier. She clutched it like a shield. And when the monitor flickered at 3:12 a.m., she braced herself. Static. Hissing. And then, a hum. Soft. Familiar. A lullaby. One she hadn't heard since she was a child. One her own mother used to sing. A melody that had no lyrics, just a slow, haunting tune that always made her feel warm. But tonight it made her skin crawl. The sound wasn't coming from the monitor. It was coming from the hallway. Sarah grabbed the flashlight and stepped out. The hallway was empty. Silent. But the humming continued. Faint. Distant. She followed it. Down the stairs. Through the kitchen. Past the laundry room. Into the basement. She hadn't been down here in months. It was mostly storage. Old boxes, baby clothes, seasonal decorations. And something else. She noticed it the moment she stepped down. A door. Small. Hidden behind the shelving unit. Had it always been there? She moved the shelves aside, heart pounding. The door was wooden. No knob. Just a small brass handle. She pulled. It opened with a creak. And behind it? Stairs. Leading down into darkness. The humming grew louder. Sarah knew she should have turned back. Called someone. Woken Daniel. But she didn't. She went down. The stairs were narrow, carved from stone, spiraling downward far deeper than the house should have allowed. The air grew colder with every step, the humming growing more melodic, more human. At the bottom she reached a room. Circular. Stone walls. No furniture. And in the center stood a crib. Not Lily's. Older. Wooden. Carved with symbols she didn't recognize. Inside it, swaddled in dark fabric, lay a doll. Porcelain. Pale face. Blue glass eyes. And a slow, crooked smile. Sarah stepped forward. There was a note pinned to its chest. Written in the same handwriting as before. I've always had a crib waiting for her. She staggered back. And behind her, a soft voice. You found it. Sarah spun around. Emily stood there. No longer dressed in soft pastels. Her cardigan was gone. Her skin paler. Her eyes, brighter. Too bright. You weren't supposed to remember yet, Emily said. But you were always stronger than the others. What is this place? Sarah whispered. A memory, Emily said, walking past her. A promise made before breath. Before life. A thread that ties us together. She turned and looked Sarah in the eyes. You gave her to me once. I never. Not in this life, Emily interrupted. But in another. When you needed something and I answered. Sarah felt her throat tighten. What did I need? Emily smiled. A second chance. And then Sarah remembered. Not like a flashback, not like a dream. Like a reality she had buried deep. A corridor in her mind she had sealed shut. She remembered the fire. The cold. A voice whispering, do you want her to live? She remembered saying yes. Anything. Emily reached toward her. You were supposed to forget. But she remembered too soon. They always do. They always come back to me. Sarah backed away. You can't have her. You already gave her. No. You did. The room shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. The doll in the crib began to move, twitching slightly. You gave her, Emily repeated, her voice layered with echoes. And I gave you your life. Now I come to collect. Sarah ran. Back up the stairs. Through the door. Into the basement. She slammed the hidden door shut and shoved the shelves back over it. The humming stopped. Everything was silent again. Except for Lily. Crying. Sarah bolted to the nursery. Lily was awake. Standing in the crib, reaching upward. Who were you talking to? Sarah whispered, breathless. Lily smiled, pointed behind her. Mimi. Sarah turned. Nothing there. But on the wall, written in faint, chalky letters, was a new message. She's been mine before. She'll be mine again. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She sat in Lily's room, back to the wall, eyes locked on the crib. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe too loud. Because deep down something had shifted. Not just in her home, in her. The line between reality and memory was gone now, blurred into something she couldn't escape from. Emily wasn't just some malicious spirit. She was history, personal history. A deal Sarah had made in some other time, some other life. And now the debt was due. The only problem? Sarah still didn't fully remember what she had promised. The chalky message on the wall was gone by morning. Vanished like it had never existed. Daniel said nothing. He'd started retreating, emotionally, ever since the second photograph appeared. He didn't know how to fight something you couldn't punch, couldn't report, couldn't explain. So he focused on work, on bills, on coffee. But Sarah couldn't do that anymore. She needed answers. Not from this life, but from before it. She called Edith Ellis again, Margaret's sister. The only living connection to whatever Emily truly was. This time Edith sounded more lucid, as if she had been expecting the call. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you again," she said. "Did she show you the crib?" Sarah's blood ran cold. "You knew about it?" "Oh yes," Edith murmured. "She showed it to me too. When I was young. Same room. Same humming. Same doll." She paused. "Only I ran before I made the deal. My sister didn't." Sarah clutched the phone. What was the deal? There was a long silence on the other end. Then Edith said, "Margaret died when she was 6. "What?" "A fever. Fast. She was gone before morning. I saw her. Cold. Blue." Sarah could barely process it. But then, a week later she came back. Walked right into the kitchen while we were eating dinner. Same smile. Same laugh. Sarah whispered, "That's not possible." "No," Edith agreed, "but it happened. My parents were overjoyed. Said it was a miracle. I knew better. That wasn't my sister anymore. It wore her skin. It had her memories. But it was something else." A chill slid down Sarah's spine. "She made a deal," Edith continued, "with something that waits between worlds. A keeper. A collector. It grants what you want most, and asks for what you love more in return." "What I love more?" Edith didn't have to say it. They both knew. Lily. The next day Sarah went digging again. Not in old records, but in her own memories. She started meditating. Holding Lily's blanket. Playing the same lullaby that had been stuck in her head ever since the night in the stone room. And then, on the third night, something happened. She fell asleep holding the old photo of the farmhouse children. And woke up, in the photo. Not literally, but in the memory of it. It was dusk. The sky orange and thick with dust. Sarah stood on a porch. Wooden. Splintered. She looked down. She was wearing a gingham dress. Her shoes were muddy. Her hands were small. Too small. She was a child. A girl. Maybe 8. And sitting next to her on the porch was a boy. Maybe 10. And beside him? A girl with bright blue eyes and a crooked smile. "Do you want her to stay?" the blue-eyed girl asked softly. Sarah turned. The voice was familiar. It was Emily's, but younger. Smaller. Laced with innocence. "Who?" Sarah asked, though part of her already knew. "Your sister," the girl said. "You said you didn't want her to leave." A toddler was playing in the grass. Blonde curls. Chubby cheeks. Laughing. "She's sick," the girl added. "But I can help." Sarah's child self looked down at her feet. "What do you want for it?" she asked. The girl smiled. "Just a promise." Sarah woke up gasping. Her pillow was soaked. The photo still clutched in her hand. And suddenly it all came crashing back. She'd made a deal. Not as an adult. Not as Lily's mother. As a child. She'd given away her sister to save her. The toddler in the dream. Her name had been. Sarah's breath caught. What was her name? She could see her face. Hear her laugh. Feel her hand in hers. But the name? Gone. Like it had been erased. No. Taken. That's what Emily meant. You brought her into the world. I only reminded her where she came from. She wasn't just coming for Lily. She already had. Sarah's sister had been erased. From her family. Her memories. The world. But now the cycle was repeating. And this time the cost was Lily. Unless Sarah could break the pattern. And to do that she needed to go deeper. To remember more. She returned to the stone room in the basement. The hidden door opened on its own now. The doll was gone. But a mirror had taken its place. Oval-shaped. Framed in iron. And when Sarah stepped in front of it, it didn't show her reflection. It showed Lily. Standing in a forest. Alone. Calling out for Mimi. And behind her, barely visible, was the blue-eyed woman. Getting closer. Sarah screamed and punched the mirror. Hard. It didn't shatter. It rippled. Like water. And in that ripple the image changed. Now it showed a name. Written in fire. Arabelle. Sarah collapsed to her knees. That was her sister's name. The one she had forgotten. The one she had traded. Everything clicked. Lily wasn't the first. She was the next. This thing, Emily or Margaret or the collector, didn't operate in a straight line. It moved through blood. Through memory. Through promises. And Sarah had opened the door when she was a child. She had given something she didn't fully understand. And now she had to take it back. But how do you take back something you don't remember giving? That night, Sarah sat Lily in her lap and whispered the name over and over again. Arabelle, Arabelle, Arabelle. Lily tilted her head, confused. Then for the first time in weeks she cried. A deep, guttural wail, like her chest couldn't hold it in. And when Sarah held her tighter, Lily whispered through sobs. She's coming. Sarah froze. Who? Mimi, Lily whispered. She said, it's time. And outside, thunder rumbled. Even though the skies were clear, Sarah stood at the door, waiting. 3:12 a.m. Footsteps on the porch. But this time she didn't hide. She opened the door herself. Emily stood there. But not just Emily. Behind her, shadows stretched for miles, faces flickering inside them. Children. Dozens. Hundreds. All watching. All waiting. You remembered? Emily said, stepping forward. Good. I want her back, Sarah said. You already have a daughter. I want both. Emily smiled sadly. You can't have two sunrises in one night. Sarah stepped aside. Let her in. But not in surrender. In challenge. Then take her from me, Sarah said, teeth clenched. Emily raised her hand. But something stopped her. The mirror. It floated up the basement stairs on its own, hovering behind Sarah, reflecting Emily's face. But instead of showing her as she was, it showed her true form. Not human. Not even close. A creature made of flickers and fractures. Mouths within mouths. Eyes that didn't blink but stared forever. Emily hissed. You remembered my name, she said, backing away. No, Sarah said. Hers. And from behind her, Lily stood, holding something in her tiny hand. A torn old photo. The one of the farmhouse. Only now, it had changed. 3 children on the porch, and one more standing behind them. A toddler. Blonde curls. Smiling. Alive. Arabelle. Emily shrieked. The mirror cracked. The wind howled through the house. The shadows twisted, screamed, fled. And when the noise stopped, Emily was gone. Lily slept soundly that night. No cries. No whispers. No 3:12 a.m. And when Sarah opened her eyes the next morning, there was someone else in the crib room. A girl. Maybe 7. Blonde. Holding Lily's hand. Sarah gasped. The girl looked up. And smiled. You remembered me. And just like that, the forgotten name became real again. Arabelle was home. After that night, things were quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel like peace, but pause. Like the calm between breaths, not after the storm, but before the next one. Arabelle was back. Real. Tangible. Alive. She slept beside Lily now, holding her little hand at night. The bond between them was immediate, as if they had always known each other, just waiting to be reunited. But something still felt off. Like a page missing from a book. Sarah had pulled her daughter from the jaws of something ancient. Something that didn't belong in this world. But she knew deep down this wasn't the end. It was the middle. Because Emily wasn't just gone. She was wounded. And wounded things crawl home. So Sarah needed to know what home meant to something like her. She started with the photo. The farmhouse one. Now that Arabelle was back, the picture had changed again. There were 4 children now, one in each corner of the porch. And behind them in the doorway stood someone else. A woman. Faint. Like a shadow that hadn't fully formed. Long black dress. Head tilted. Hands clasped behind her back. Her face was blurred. Sarah tried staring at it for too long once and her nose bled. She took the photo to the library, the town's oldest one, tucked behind the church with the crumbling steps. There she met a woman named Gwen who handled old town records. Looks like one of the Parlow children, Gwen said, squinting at the photo. Back when the land around here was all farmland. Late 1800s. Sarah leaned in. Do you know what happened to them? Gwen hesitated. I can look into it, but if it is them, I'll warn you, their story's not a happy one. The next day, Gwen called her back in. She laid a folder out in front of Sarah, her expression tight. They were all found dead, Gwen said quietly. Sarah felt her stomach twist. All but one. Who? Gwen turned the page. There was a name. Emmeline Parlow. Age, 9. Survivor of the 1891 Parlow family tragedy. They found her in the basement, Gwen whispered. Curled up next to the bodies. Perfectly clean. Not a scratch on her. Sarah leaned forward, heart pounding. What happened to the others? No cause of death, Gwen said. Just gone. Eyes wide open. No marks. It was like their souls were ripped out. Sarah's breath hitched. And Emmeline? She never spoke again. Got placed with a foster family in the next town. Disappeared 6 months later. Her foster parents were found dead. Same look. Same blank eyes. Sarah knew. She knew. Emmeline. Emily. Same girl. Same story. The beginning. At home, Arabelle had drawn something. She was sitting at the kitchen table, crayons scattered everywhere, scribbling like she remembered something. When Sarah looked over her shoulder, she froze. It was a drawing of a tree. Dead. Twisted. Beneath it, a small girl in a long black dress. Alone. But what sent shivers down Sarah's spine wasn't the picture. It was what Arabelle had written at the bottom. A name. Not Emily. Not Emmeline. The collector. Sarah crouched beside her. Who told you that name? Arabelle shrugged. She did. In the room of mirrors. Sarah blinked. What room? Arabelle looked up, her voice quieter now. The one where she puts the one she keeps. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She waited again. 3:12 a.m. Nothing. She stared at the photo again, then flipped it over for the 100th time. But this time, there was writing. Appearing slowly like ink soaking through paper. One word. Return. She went back to the church. The chapel where she'd first confronted Emily. She walked through the broken pews, down the aisle, to the altar with the burned cross. And behind it, she saw it. A trapdoor. How had she missed it before? Dust-covered. Hidden beneath an old rug. She opened it. A ladder descended into blackness. And she climbed. The air was colder than any place she'd ever been. Colder than it should have been. Not just a chill, it bit. As she reached the bottom, she found herself standing in a circular room. Stone walls. Old symbols carved into them. And all around her, mirrors. Hundreds of them. Each one reflecting not her face, but the face of a child. Eyes wide. Mouths moving. Silent screams. She backed away horrified. And then she saw herself. Not her face. Her younger self. A little girl, maybe 8, standing in one of the mirrors holding something in her hand. A paper. Sarah stepped closer. The reflection unfolded the note. Read. Do you want her to stay? And suddenly Sarah was there. Inside the mirror. A memory? A trap? She didn't know. She was a child again. Standing on the porch. Only this time she wasn't alone. Emmeline was standing beside her. Hair in braids. Hands behind her back. That same slow, crooked smile. You came back, Emmeline said softly. Sarah nodded. I want to know the truth, she whispered. Why me? Why her? Why any of us? Emmeline sat on the steps. And for once, she spoke clearly. I died in the woods, she said. A long time ago. Chased by something I couldn't see. My mother had made a deal. She wanted a son. Gave something she didn't understand. And that thing came for me. She looked up at Sarah. But I ran. I found a mirror. In the ground. And it showed me another world. One where I could live. And you took it? Sarah asked. Emmeline nodded. I stepped through. But I couldn't stay unless I became something else. The collector isn't a person. It's a role. A shape. A hunger that passes on. She looked at her hands. I became her to survive. Sarah felt sick. But the deals, the children. Emmeline looked up, eyes hollow. I remember each one. I hated it. At first. But then, it got easier. She stood. You brought her back, she said. You broke the cycle. Sarah narrowed her eyes. Then it's over. Emmeline shook her head. No. Sarah's chest tightened. Why not? Because someone has to hold the mirror. Someone has to keep the door closed. Back in the real world, Sarah woke in the chapel, covered in dust. The trapdoor was gone. But in her hand was a note. One must collect so the others can forget. She looked up and saw herself in the broken stained glass window. But her eyes weren't hers. They were turning blue. Just like Emmeline's. Just like Emily's. That night, Sarah tucked Lily and Arabelle into bed. She kissed their foreheads. Held them tight. And when the clock struck 3:12, she walked to the basement. To the wall. To the door that wasn't there but would open if you remembered it right. And she stepped through. Into the mirror. Taking her place. So no one else ever would. Daniel didn't notice it at first. How could he? Sarah still kissed him good morning. Still asked about his day. Still poured Lily's juice the exact way she liked it. 1 ice cube, red straw, no pulp. But there were little things. She stopped sleeping. Stopped eating. She stared into mirrors longer than necessary. And once, late at night, he found her standing in Lily's room, completely still, just watching their daughters sleep. Not like a mother, like a guardian, or a gatekeeper. The change was gradual. So gradual that Daniel chalked it up to stress. After all, they'd both been through hell. The babysitter, the nightmares, the footage, the reappearance of Arabelle, a daughter they technically didn't know they had, who now felt so natural in their home it was unsettling. He tried to convince himself this was just post-trauma weirdness. Until the night he woke up to the sound of humming. It was the lullaby again. The one Sarah had always used for Lily. Except now it sounded slower, hollow, mechanical almost. Daniel stepped into the hallway, rubbing his eyes. The nursery door was cracked open. The humming was coming from inside. But when he looked in, no one was there. Just Lily asleep. And Arabelle staring directly at him. Eyes wide. Not blinking. She's not mommy anymore, Arabelle whispered. Daniel blinked. What? Arabelle turned toward the window. She doesn't blink when she breathes. Daniel frowned. That's not a thing. She talks to the mirror at night, Arabelle continued in that eerie, emotionless tone that kids somehow get when they're about to say something way too true. She asks it if the door is closed. Daniel's throat tightened. What door? Arabelle didn't answer. She just smiled. And when Daniel left the room, the humming started again. From the mirror. The next morning, Sarah was in the kitchen making pancakes. Her eyes looked bright. Too bright. Her skin, flawless. No more dark circles. No fatigue. In fact, she looked better than she had in years. Too good. Daniel sat down watching her. She smiled. You okay? He nodded, but not really. He watched her fingers. They never twitched. Never fidgeted. Never flexed. It was like they only moved when they had a task. Perfectly still, otherwise. That wasn't Sarah. Sarah was always jittery. Always moving. Always human. He waited until she went grocery shopping. Then he searched her closet. He didn't know what he expected to find, but what he did find chilled him to the bone. Underneath a pile of sweaters in an old shoebox was a mirror. Small, oval, black glass. And taped to the back of it was a photo. From the farmhouse. Except this one was different. It was just Sarah. Standing in front of the tree. Alone. And behind her, the woman in the black dress. But instead of her face being blurred this time, it was Sarah's. Her own face, erased. Replaced with nothing but eyes. Glowing. Endless. That night, Daniel confronted her. They were brushing teeth. Ordinary night. Everything calm. Until he asked, "Do you remember the first time we kissed?" She smiled. Of course. Where? Her smile faltered. In the car, she said. After your dad's funeral. No, Daniel replied softly. That was the second time. Sarah stared at him, still smiling. But her eyes didn't blink. Didn't twitch. Didn't correct herself. She just stood there, toothbrush in hand, staring at him like he was a painting she hadn't finished understanding. And then she said something that shattered everything. I'll remember it better next time. Next time? What did that mean? That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He got out of bed quietly and walked to the basement. The old brick wall, the one he'd always thought was just part of the house's foundation, looked strange tonight. It was breathing. Not literally. But it moved in and out. Like it wanted to breathe. He reached out. Touched it. It was warm. And then he heard something on the other side. Not footsteps. Not whispers. Something else. Ticking. Like a grandfather clock. Slow. Deliberate. Echoing. He pulled his hand back. Ran upstairs. And walked straight into Arabelle standing in the hallway. Barefoot. Holding the mirror from the closet. She's still in here, Arabelle whispered, pressing the mirror to her chest. Daniel froze. Who? Arabelle looked up at him. But when she spoke, her voice wasn't hers. It was Sarah's. The real one. Don't trust her, the voice said. She knows you're catching on. And then Arabelle collapsed. Out cold. Mirror shattering beside her. They rushed her to the hospital. Sarah held Arabelle's hand the whole time. Seemed perfectly calm. Too calm. Even the nurses looked uncomfortable. When the doctor asked Sarah what happened, she smiled and said, "Kids faint sometimes." Daniel tried to interject. Tried to mention the mirror, the voice, but Sarah cut him off with a look. A look that wasn't hers. That night, Daniel dug through every file, every box, every journal they had. Trying to piece together what happened the night Sarah walked into that basement. He found an old note. From weeks ago. Before Arabelle came back. Just one line. "If I go in, and don't come out, keep them away from the mirrors." Daniel dropped the paper. And that's when he realized. He hadn't seen his own reflection in 2 days. The next morning, Daniel pretended everything was fine. He made coffee, kissed Sarah on the cheek, laughed at her joke. And as soon as she stepped outside to get the mail, he locked the door, grabbed Lily and Arabelle, and ran. He didn't know where he was going, only that the woman living in his house wasn't his wife, and that his real wife was still alive, somewhere behind the glass. Daniel's mind raced as he drove through the night, the headlights casting long, ghostly shadows on the road. His hands trembled, gripping the steering wheel, as his thoughts spun in a whirlwind of confusion and fear. It felt like the world had flipped upside down, and he had no idea how to get back to reality. Arabelle was in the back seat, her eyes wide and vacant, as if she were still trying to make sense of the strange events that had unfolded in their home. Lily, thankfully, was asleep. At least she seemed oblivious to the tension in the car. They had to keep moving. They couldn't go back. Not yet. Not until Daniel understood what had happened to Sarah. After what felt like an eternity, Daniel pulled into the parking lot of a rundown building at the edge of town. He had no idea what to expect. The address he'd tracked down was barely more than a whisper on the internet, an obscure mention of a person who had dealt with the kind of supernatural forces Daniel was now dealing with. A person who might know how to get Sarah back. Her name was Marianne Keller. He'd found her after hours of scouring old forums, digging through reports of similar cases. The strange disappearances, the people who had returned from the dead, the families who had fallen prey to whatever this entity was. And through it all, there was one name that kept popping up: Marianne Keller. She had lived in isolation for years, holed up in a dilapidated cabin in the woods. Some said she was a witch. Others claimed she was a former priestess, banished from the church for dabbling in forbidden rituals. But one thing was clear: she knew about the mirrors, about the collector. Daniel stepped out of the car, taking one last look at Arabelle and Lily before he walked up to the door of the cabin. The house was small, with peeling paint and overgrown weeds creeping up the porch. There were no lights on inside, but Daniel had been told she didn't sleep. She just waited. As he knocked, a voice from the other side echoed through the wood. "You shouldn't be here." Daniel's heart skipped a beat. It was a woman's voice, sharp and steady. "Marianne Keller?" he called out, his voice hoarse. The door creaked open just a sliver. 2 pale eyes peered out from the darkness. Marianne was older than he expected, with silver hair pulled back in a tight knot and a weathered face that looked like it had seen more than its fair share of horrors. "I can help you," she said simply, as if she had known he would come. "But you're too late." They sat across from each other at a table that seemed older than the cabin itself. Daniel could hear the wind howling outside, the trees bending in protest, as if the world itself was trying to warn him. "What do you know about the collector?" Daniel asked, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. Marianne's expression didn't change. She stared at him for a moment, then glanced down at the table. "I know more than you can imagine," she replied. "And I've seen the aftermath of its games. It's not the kind of thing you fight. It's not the kind of thing you defeat. You just survive it, if you can." Daniel's fists clenched. "I need to bring her back. My wife, Sarah. She's not the same. She's different." Marianne nodded slowly. "I figured as much. You know what's happened to her?" Marianne leaned back in her chair, her eyes distant as she traced patterns in the wood. "The collector doesn't take people. It doesn't kill them. It doesn't even trap them. It collects them. And once you're in, you're bound by the rules. It doesn't matter if you're alive or dead." Daniel felt his heart drop. "Then, how do I get her back? What do I do?" Marianne's eyes darkened. "You don't. Not unless you're willing to make a trade." "A trade?" She looked at him, the faintest flicker of sadness crossing her features. "The collector thrives on deals. It feeds on the choices you make. You can try to pull someone out, but the cost will be steep." Daniel's mind raced. "What kind of cost?" Marianne stood up, walking to a nearby shelf where several old books were stacked in a haphazard pile. She pulled one down and opened it, flipping through yellowed pages until she found a diagram. "It's not just a mirror," she explained. "It's a doorway. A portal between worlds. And once you've crossed into the collector's domain, there's only one way to come back." She pointed to a symbol in the book, a series of interlocking circles that seemed to pulse with a faint glow. "The price is your soul. You give up your own life force to release someone else. You trade yourself for them." Daniel's stomach churned. "You're telling me I have to give myself up to save her?" Marianne looked at him with an unreadable expression. Yes, but there's a catch. Once you do that, you'll never truly be yourself again. You'll become a vessel for the collector's will. You'll become the next collector. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. What? The final rule, Marianne said softly. If you take someone else's place, you become it. You become the one who watches, who waits, and who collects. Daniel's world tilted on its axis. You're telling me? If I try to save Sarah, his voice faltered, the weight of the words sinking in. I'll become the thing that took her? Marianne nodded solemnly. That's how the collector works. It doesn't just take. It replaces. It makes sure the cycle never ends. Daniel's mind was a storm of chaos. He felt the crushing weight of his decision pressing down on him. If he didn't act, Sarah would remain trapped in that mirror world forever. But if he did, everything he loved would be destroyed. The family he had worked so hard to protect would fall into the hands of that thing. He turned to Marianne, his voice strained. Is there any way to break the cycle? Any way to escape? Marianne's eyes softened with a strange, knowing sadness. There's only one way, but it's a path you may not be ready for. What is it? Destroy the mirror. Daniel blinked. What? Destroy the mirror. The one that connects them to the other side. The one they came through. He shook his head. But if I do that, I'll lose Sarah forever. Marianne placed a hand on his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Not if you do it right. Not if you're willing to sacrifice everything to end it once and for all. Daniel stood up abruptly, his mind racing. I have to think. I have to. But as he turned to leave, Marianne's voice stopped him. Remember, Daniel, she said softly, every choice you make will cost you. And the collector always gets its due. Daniel left the cabin in a daze, his mind spiraling. He had no idea what to do. There was no clear answer, no way to know what was right. All he knew was that time was running out. And if he didn't act soon, he would lose everything. And in the end, the one thing he didn't know was whether the real Sarah was still in there, or whether he had lost her to the collector forever. The road home felt longer than it ever had before. The trees loomed on either side, dark and oppressive. Daniel's hands gripped the steering wheel with a tension that made his fingers ache, but his mind was elsewhere, caught in a whirlwind of choices and consequences, each one seemingly worse than the last. He had been to Marianne Keller, seeking answers, hoping for a solution to save his wife from whatever twisted mirror world the collector had ensnared her in. But instead he had found more questions, more uncertainty, more horror. The collector didn't just take people. It replaced them. And the price for trying to rescue Sarah would be a cost beyond what Daniel could even fathom. He kept replaying Marianne's words in his head. Destroy the mirror. The one that connects them to the other side. That was the solution. The answer. But it came with a heavy price. If he destroyed the mirror, Sarah would be gone forever. There would be no coming back. But if he didn't, what would happen to her? Would she be lost forever in that alternate world, twisted by the collector's influence? Or would he have to make the ultimate sacrifice, give himself up, to take her place? Could he live with that? Could he live with the consequences of becoming the very thing he was trying to stop? As Daniel pulled into his driveway, he saw the house looming in the distance, its windows dark. Sarah's car was parked outside, but there was no sign of her. Just silence. He stepped out of the car and glanced over at the house. His heart pounded in his chest, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Was Sarah inside? Or was it the thing that had taken her, the thing that wore her face and smiled at him with those perfect, lifeless eyes? Lily and Arabelle were asleep in the back of the car, blissfully unaware of the storm that had been raging in Daniel's mind for the past few hours. He didn't know how to explain any of this to them. He didn't even know if they would understand. But the weight of what he had learned from Marianne pressed heavily on him. The collector had its claws in his family now, and Daniel couldn't help but feel that it was too late to turn back. No matter what he did, no matter how he fought, there would be no happy ending. It was just a matter of choosing which nightmare he would face. He walked into the house, feeling the cold air greet him as the door creaked open. The familiar scent of his home, the smell of Sarah's perfume, the faint trace of the lavender-scented candles she liked to burn. It should have been comforting, but instead it felt foreign, suffocating. "Sarah?" he called out, his voice hesitant. Silence. He stepped further into the hallway, his footsteps echoing on the wooden floors. The house felt wrong, as if the walls were closing in on him. He headed toward the kitchen, but as he passed the living room, he froze. There, sitting on the couch, was Sarah. She was staring at the TV, her eyes wide and unblinking, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She didn't acknowledge him as he stood there watching her. "Sarah?" Daniel called again, his voice trembling. "Are you okay?" But she didn't respond. She didn't even move. A cold shiver ran down his spine. Something was wrong. This wasn't the woman he had married. This wasn't Sarah. It couldn't be. He backed away slowly, his heart racing, his mind desperately trying to make sense of what he was seeing. He couldn't stay in this house any longer. He had to do something. The mirror. He had to destroy the mirror. But where was it? Where had Sarah hidden it? His thoughts raced as he rushed upstairs to the bedroom. He searched frantically, ripping through drawers, looking under the bed, behind the curtains, but there was no sign of the mirror. No sign of the object that had connected Sarah to the collector's world. His mind started to spiral. What if it's not here? What if it's somewhere else? What if I'm too late? He turned around, desperate for answers, and that's when he saw it. The reflection. In the window. Behind him. For a split second he thought he saw Sarah standing there, but when he turned around she was still sitting motionless on the couch. His heart stopped. He turned back to the window. But now it wasn't Sarah. It was her. The woman in the black dress. The one who had been following them since the beginning. Her face was twisted with an eerie smile, her eyes glowing a bright, unnatural blue. She stepped forward, and for the first time, Daniel felt the full weight of her presence. "You're too late," the woman said, her voice soft and hypnotic. "Who are you?" Daniel demanded, his voice shaking with fear. The woman tilted her head as if amused by his question. "I'm the one who decides who stays. Who goes." The smile on her face grew wider, more menacing. "You're not the first to try to break the rules," she said. "But you will be the last." The walls of the house seemed to close in on him, the air thick with tension. Daniel felt a deep, suffocating pressure on his chest. He could feel the weight of the decision ahead of him. The mirror. Destroy it and lose Sarah forever. Or try to take her place and become something else. The collector was no longer just a threat. It was now a part of his world, an inescapable presence. "Sarah?" he whispered, his voice filled with desperation. "Where are you? What have you become?" But the woman in the black dress only smiled. And as she stepped closer, her hand reaching toward him, Daniel knew the decision had already been made. He wasn't the one who would save her. He was the one who would become part of the collection. Back downstairs, Arabelle stirred in her sleep. She mumbled something in her sleep, her little face twisting with confusion. And for a moment, Daniel thought he saw something else, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. No, not Arabelle. Not her too. But the woman in the black dress's smile widened. And in that moment, Daniel realized what he had to do. He had to destroy the mirror. He had to end the collector's reign. But to do that, he would have to sacrifice it all. Daniel rushed back downstairs, his heart pounding. The woman's voice echoed in his ears. It's already too late. And yet, Daniel would fight. He would fight for the family he once had. Even if it meant never being the same again. The air was thick with tension as Daniel stood at the bottom of the stairs, staring into the living room where Sarah, or what was left of her, sat motionless. The woman in the black dress had vanished, but her presence still lingered in the house like a heavy fog, suffocating everything it touched. He had no more time to waste. The mirror. That was the answer. And yet, as Daniel thought about it, his body shook with dread. He couldn't imagine what would happen once he destroyed it. Sarah would be lost forever. The life they had, the family they had built, would crumble to dust. And worst of all, he would never be able to look at himself in a mirror again without seeing something else. Something wrong. Something that wasn't him. But the truth was he had no choice. The collector was here. It had already claimed Sarah, and it had already started claiming his family. If he didn't act now, they would all be consumed, lost in a world of glass and shadows forever. He dashed upstairs, moving through the hallway with urgency. He searched every room, tearing apart closets and drawers, looking for the one thing that could either save or destroy them all. He had no idea where Sarah had hidden it, but he knew one thing for sure. It had to be here somewhere. And then, in the corner of the master bedroom, behind a stack of old books and blankets, he found it. The mirror. It wasn't large, just a small antique mirror with an ornate wooden frame. But it exuded an eerie energy like it was pulsing with something alive. Something that didn't belong in this world. His fingers shook as he reached out to touch it. The surface was cold to the touch, colder than anything he had ever felt before. The reflection staring back at him wasn't his own, but that of a woman in the background. Sarah? His heart skipped a beat, but as he looked closer, the woman in the reflection shifted, her face blurring into something else. A grotesque, otherworldly shape. The collector. He had seen it before in flashes of memory, glimpsed its true face in the shadows of his own mind, but now, staring at it through the mirror, he felt its malevolent presence fill the room. He could feel it watching him, waiting for him to make his move. He couldn't hesitate. Without thinking, Daniel grabbed the mirror by its frame and hurled it to the ground. The glass shattered into 1,000 pieces, each fragment catching the dim light of the room as it fell. For a moment, everything was silent. And then, the house shook. It was a violent, jarring force like an earthquake splitting the earth apart. Daniel stumbled backward, his vision blurring with the impact. He heard Arabelle and Lily scream from downstairs, their voices filled with terror. But there was something else now. A low, guttural hum that seemed to come from every direction. The walls were groaning under the pressure, the floors creaking as if the entire house was being consumed by something vast and inescapable. Daniel's heart raced. He had done it. He had destroyed the mirror. But in doing so, he had triggered something far worse. He ran down the stairs, calling out to his daughters. Arabelle, Lily. His voice echoed through the house, bouncing off the walls. But when he reached the living room, the sight before him made his blood run cold. Sarah was standing there, but not in the way he had hoped. Her eyes were wide, filled with an eerie, empty stare. Her body was stiff, her limbs unnatural. She wasn't moving. She wasn't even breathing. And standing beside her, just as he feared, was the woman in the black dress. She was smiling now, but it wasn't a smile of warmth. It was a cruel, knowing grin that sent a chill down Daniel's spine. She's gone, Daniel, the woman said softly, her voice almost sweet. There's no bringing her back now. Daniel's legs felt weak, and he had to steady himself against the doorframe. What have you done to her? The woman tilted her head, her smile widening. I didn't do anything. She chose this path long ago. She wanted to be a part of the collection. Daniel's stomach churned. No, she couldn't have. You're lying. The woman's eyes flickered, almost pityingly. No, Daniel. You are the one who is lying to yourself. The collector doesn't force anyone. It only offers the choice. Daniel's breath came in ragged gasps as he tried to process her words. His mind spun in confusion. How could Sarah have chosen this? How could she have willingly become part of this twisted game? And yet, something in his gut told him that there was truth in what the woman was saying. He turned to Sarah, his voice cracking. Sarah, please look at me. Please come back. But Sarah didn't move. Her eyes remained fixed, unblinking, staring straight ahead at the woman in the black dress. It was as if she had already crossed some invisible threshold, like she was already lost. She can't hear you, Daniel, the woman said softly. She's already made her choice. You can't save her now. Daniel's mind was reeling. The woman in the black dress was right. Sarah had made a choice, long before he even knew what was happening. She had chosen to enter the collector's domain, to be part of its collection. And now, in destroying the mirror, Daniel had only made things worse. He had sealed their fate. And the fate of his family. He turned to the woman, his voice low and filled with fury. What now? What do you want from me? The woman's smile never faltered. Oh, nothing, Daniel. I've already gotten what I wanted. And just as those words left her lips, the ground beneath their feet seemed to give way. The house began to disintegrate around them, the walls cracking and splintering as the very fabric of reality seemed to unravel. The woman in the black dress stepped backward into the shadows, her form blurring as if it were dissolving into the darkness. You made your choice too, she said, her voice echoing. And now you will join the collection. Forever. The last thing Daniel saw before the world collapsed around him was Sarah, her blank eyes staring at him through the debris. And then everything went black. The darkness consumed him. There was no light, no sound, just a suffocating silence that seemed to stretch on forever. It was as though Daniel was floating, suspended in an endless void, unable to move, unable to speak. The air was thick with a kind of unnatural stillness, a heaviness that pressed in from all sides, suffocating him slowly. And then, as if from the depths of his own mind, a voice echoed. Daniel. It was a whisper at first, faint and distant like a breath against the skin. But it grew louder, clearer, until it filled his entire consciousness. Daniel? He jerked upright, gasping for air, his heart pounding as the world around him solidified into something real. He was no longer in the house. He was somewhere else. Somewhere dark, cold, and alien. And there, standing before him, was the woman in the black dress. She smiled at him, that same twisted smile, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The air around her seemed to pulse with power, as if she were the very embodiment of the darkness that now surrounded him. "Welcome to the collection," she said, her voice like a soft caress, yet sharp with malice. "It's so much more beautiful than you could ever imagine." Daniel blinked, trying to make sense of his surroundings. He felt a wave of nausea wash over him. This place, it wasn't a place at all. It was a space outside of time. A reflection of reality, twisted and warped into something incomprehensible. There were no walls, no floor, no ceiling. Just endless mirrors stretching out into the void, their surfaces reflecting nothing but darkness. He looked around frantically, his pulse quickening as he saw shapes emerging from the mirrors. Faces. Figures. The trapped souls of those who had been taken. Their reflections frozen, their bodies mere shadows, their eyes empty, lost. "Sarah?" he whispered, his voice trembling as he stepped toward the nearest mirror. The woman in the black dress chuckled softly. "You'll find her, eventually. If you're lucky." Daniel's stomach twisted in fear. "What do you mean? Where is she?" The woman stepped forward, her gaze cold and calculating. "She is here. But not in the way you think." He moved toward the mirror again, desperation clawing at him. He couldn't give up. He couldn't lose her. The reflection in the mirror began to shift. At first it was just a blur, but then it cleared and Daniel's breath caught in his throat. There, in the glass, was Sarah. But not the Sarah he remembered. Not the woman he had married. No, this Sarah was different. Her eyes were cold, lifeless. Her expression was vacant, as though she were no longer a person at all, just a puppet, a shadow of her former self. "Sarah?" Daniel whispered, his heart breaking. The woman in the black dress laughed, a cruel sound that reverberated in the empty space around them. "You think she's still in there? You think you can save her?" Daniel's throat tightened. "No, I won't give up on her. I won't let you have her." The woman's smile grew wider, almost pitying. "You already did, Daniel. You already did the moment you shattered the mirror." The truth hit him like a punch to the gut. Sarah hadn't chosen to enter the collector's world. She hadn't chosen to be trapped in that mirror. She had been chosen. The collector had chosen her. And now she was part of it. Part of the collection. But it wasn't just her. It was everyone who had ever been taken. All the souls that had been lost, trapped in the mirrors, forever bound to the collector's domain. The woman in the black dress was just its emissary, its agent, the one who brought new souls into the fold. The collector itself was not a single entity, but an endless, insidious force that consumed everything in its path, trapping souls in its endless labyrinth of glass and shadow. And Daniel had unwittingly stepped into it. "The collector doesn't just collect," the woman said, her voice low and sinister. "It replaces. Those who are taken aren't simply lost. They are remade. They become part of the collection. And once they're in, they can never escape." Daniel's hands shook as the realization sank in. "And what about me?" he whispered. "What happens to me?" The woman's eyes glinted with something dangerous. "You will become part of it too, Daniel. You shattered the mirror. You've made your choice. And now you will join the collection just like the others." He tried to step back, but his feet felt heavy as though the very air was pulling him in. The reflections in the mirrors began to shift, swirling around him, reaching out with tendrils of shadow. "No." Daniel gasped, struggling to move, to break free from the invisible chains that were tightening around him. But the more he struggled, the more the shadows closed in. The faces in the mirrors twisted, their eyes staring into his soul, pleading, begging for release. But there was no release. There was only the collector. And now he was a part of it. The woman in the black dress stepped forward, her hand reaching out to touch Daniel's face. The moment her fingers made contact, it felt like ice coursing through his veins. The cold spread through him, numbing him, draining him of his will. "You'll understand soon enough," she said softly. "Once you become one of us, you will know the truth. You will know the price of every choice you've ever made." And then, the world around him shifted once again. The mirrors grew larger, stretching out to impossible heights, the reflections of countless souls twisting and writhing inside them. And in the distance, Daniel saw the shape of a new mirror forming, one with his own reflection staring back at him. His heart sank as the realization hit him. He was becoming part of the collector. His soul was being bound, his body remade into a reflection of the very thing he had been fighting. A vessel for the force that had taken everything from him. As the final shards of his identity began to dissolve, he felt his consciousness slipping away. The weight of the collector's power pressed in on him, folding him into its endless, dark labyrinth. He tried to scream, to fight, but it was too late. His final thoughts were of Sarah, trapped in the mirror, and of the family he had lost. And then, as the darkness closed in, he understood the truth. The collector was eternal. It had no end. And neither would he. In the distance, the woman in the black dress watched as Daniel's form slowly merged with the collection. "Welcome to eternity, Daniel." And then, with a final smile, she faded into the shadows, leaving him, and all the others, trapped in the endless void of the collector's domain. The cycle would continue. And the mirrors would never stop reflecting.